So I've been saying for a while that all these results coming in the Democratic primary, they don't really make any sense. There's all these inconsistencies. Like the weird urban-rural split in Massachusetts, and in Michigan it was, the fact that she blew, she won Wayne County by like 60,000 votes or something, right? Um, and it was the same thing in Boston. Like she lost all of Massachusetts except for the areas of Boston that you would expect her to control. And all these other, the fact that she's supposed to be doing better with Democrats, but she can't win a caucus. All these sorts of things that just didn't really add up. And so I've been doing these split analyses, right? I've been saying, well, on top of that, I mean, even the polling looked funny, right? Like weird things like Bernie doing better with conservatives and Hillary doing better with liberals. It's like okay, maybe that's what the TV wants you to think, but if you have the slightest grasp of the issues, you couldn't really actually think that, right? And all these other sorts of things, right? So I've been doing these kind of split analyses, right? On the one hand, I've been saying, if we take the polls at face value, then they say this. On the other hand, I've been saying, okay, maybe that's true, but it's obviously rigged. So why are we taking the polls at face value? Why are we doing this at all when it's obviously not fair, right? And the results have come in. She has overperformed a little bit in Florida, but it's within the margin of error. The North Carolina results are actually about what I would have suggested, so that's fair. But the Ohio results specifically are the first point where some flags start to go off. Now again, if she was going to rig Ohio, what would she do? She would rig Cleveland, and look, she seems to be giving herself quite a substantial head start on Cleveland, as well as, let's say, Columbus. I'm a little too late for this on Columbus, but I mean, we've got a head start there, maybe not as big. She had a head start in Columbus as well, right? So, what is this, Cincinnati? Yeah, look, she's got a head start in Cincinnati here as well. So, it says initial results, another one there. I presume that means like absentee ballots and stuff like that. That is the results that they can stuff. And I'm kind of torn here. I'm not sure if they're sticking on this initial results part for so long. They should be beyond that at this point. I'm not sure if they're sticking to that because they want the Hillary numbers to they want to get the headlines, or if they're doing it because they're trying to draw attention to it. Either way, they didn't do this with the other counties. With the the other states, it looked something like that, right? But if I zoom out and I go to any, well, I guess it's not doing that there. It's not doing that there either. Okay, so it seems to be something that's unique in Ohio. Which is another strange thing to point out. So you can see, or you can put together sort of a chain of logic. I'm going to change my batteries. I'll be back in a minute. Okay, but you can see what they're doing here. Or you can put together a pretty clear sort of chain of things. Right, so the Hillary team looks at the aggregate polling, and they're saying Ohio will be the closest, right? And so they say, geez, we better make sure that we get lots and lots of stuffed ballots in Ohio because that's the one where they're gonna have a big turnout, they're gonna get us. I suggested the opposite. I suggested that Ohio is kind of a purple state. She should be more concerned about Illinois more than anything else. And you can see the results here. it's still early enough that we can't really jump to conclusions. But is anybody going to believe that Hillary Clinton did better in Ohio than North Carolina? Is anybody really going to believe that? Do you believe that? Oops. See, and you can see how that happens, right? Because they think that Ohio is going to be the one where they might lose, so they stuff tons and tons of ballots, and then it turns out that all the independents are voting for Trump or whatever else, right? I actually don't think that Ohio is a particularly liberal state. I think it's kind of a more of a middle of the road. That's why Ohio voted. I believe Ohio voted for Bush. Okay, so it's not a particularly liberal state, is it? So this idea that it would go, a whole lot over towards, this crazy liberal from Vermont, I didn't think that would happen. I suggested that they would split, okay, but I did suggest they would win in Illinois and Missouri, which they seem to have stuffed in ways that are a little bit more reasonable. Actually, if I look at this, it seems like the numbers have gone down a little. And actually, that is what you would expect, right? Because as time goes on, the real votes are going to come in, right? So they get closer and closer. And we'll find out, actually, that it is still actually a good point, right? Ohio has been called by the Associated Press. They call it pretty quickly. Which again is a whole thing, right? It seemed to be like she had a huge lead, the kind of thing that you see when people stuff ballot boxes. Was turnout high enough that in the end he catches up? Based on what I'm seeing here, it's obvious that she tried to rig it. Okay, she did everything she could to rig Ohio. If Sanders manages to come back and win, then it's clear that he's the nominee and she should drop out. That's really, if she would go to that great lengths to rig it and still lose, Missouri's still pretty low, and the numbers did get a little bit closer there. Illinois, again, I don't think anybody really seriously thought she could win in Illinois with everything going on there. So, including the fact that it's an open primary. So, none of this really adds up. But the Ohio is a real. She might have screwed that up in making it appear a little too obvious. But hey, in the end, it might have been just enough, huh? It's getting closer. See, but again, this is what you would expect, right? When they started off, Clinton was at 70, or very close to it. She's come down a good 10 points because all the stuffed ballots came in first, right? And that's what she wants to, right? She wants the TV, because she's still geared towards old media, right? She wants the TV to have the result. It's still very orchestrated. He has come ahead a little in Missouri. I claimed somewhere around 60. It's still early. That could get a little bit closer. Those Illinois results are disappointing, but it seems as though there's still a lot of the state that hasn't come in yet. So, and where would she rig? She would rig Chicago, which is actually relatively close, and she would rig Springfield, which hasn't come in at all yet. So, this is not. It's starting to look like she may have made the same error in Illinois and Missouri that she made in Michigan, which was that she didn't rig it enough, and that she over rigged it in Ohio, which kind of tips it off. We'll see how close it gets in the end. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe there was a higher level of support there than I thought, and in the end, it'll balance out more or less. In order for me to get numbers that were roughly right, roughly split, he would have had to have won Montana by a significant margin, Illinois by a significant margin. It looks like Florida and North Carolina are balancing out, and he would have had to have split Ohio. So if he can take Ohio down, and I know it doesn't look good, but if you begin with the assumption that okay, the ballots at the start are hers because she stuffed them, and the ballots near the end are his, you would expect him to catch up quite a bit as the night goes on, and it would be similar with Illinois. But whether he can overpower this enough is looking. Okay, so let me be clear. I believe that what I've seen so far leads me to the conclusion that the election is fixed. Okay, but you can only fix an election to a certain point, right? You fix it by stuffing ballots. You don't just snap your fingers. We're not at the point yet where we've got the machine will change your vote or whatever, right? We still have trails and etc. Right? So when you rig an election, the way you rig an election is you create all kinds of. See, it came down again. Is you stuff ballots, right? You throw all kinds of votes in your favor. Okay. What I've seen here compared to the polling and the way that it's playing out and where it's happening and everything else makes it crystal clear to me that she is trying to rig it. Okay, but I think that she tried to rig Michigan and failed. I think that she tried to win Massachusetts and only won barely because of it, which has, which combined with the information that she was given, had her rig Ohio more. Right, and if he can overpower that, if he can overwhelm that with turnout, then this is amazing. What you're seeing. It's a long way before we get to that point. I know that it probably sounds like I'm just kind of making up a story here. Nice story, Jay. Nice story, sis, etc. But it's not really. I'm not throwing data at you. I might throw a little bit at you from time to time, but I'm not throwing harsh numbers at you. I'm not doing that. I'm just looking at it because I know how to read it and I know how to see it and I understand it. I'm not expecting you to take what I'm saying and win a legal battle with it. I'm not even expecting you to take what I'm saying and even really believe it. Conduct your own research. Certainly, if what I'm saying is to go anywhere at all, it's going to require a lot more. I'm not expecting, to have the mainstream media, run a headline, Hillary rigs election based on, some rambling on YouTube, right? But I am providing you with an educated perspective, and these results are exceedingly suspicious. There's a pattern of inconsistencies, and the narrative that I'm constructing is erected on, like I say, a base of an educated observer. Um, that's all I intend it to be. I don't have the um, I'm not vested. I don't even live in the United States, right? For me to interfere with your election would be kind of weird, and for me to, I don't even think I could. I don't have standing. There's not a legal process I could follow, and I mean, I'm not really interested in kind of getting there, sort of thing. But I'm telling you, from the perspective of an educated observer, that's both educated, that both has a substantial mathematical background and a substantial political background, that there are, it's just barrage after barrage of information that does not make any sense. And it's to the point where you can start to, it came down again, where you can start to understand what's happening. You can build that narrative, not because I'm imagining it, but because it's that obvious. Data can tell you a story. Even when it's loose, rough data like this, it can tell you a story, and that's what I'm doing. Is I'm telling you the story the data is telling you. It's just I'm able to translate that out of math into English. Again, I know that you're going to see different um, explanations. Remember, I said this a few weeks ago. When you rig a primary, you don't rig a primary purely at the voting stage. You also rig it at the polling stage, right? I think that came out funny. You don't rig it purely at the voting stage. You also rig it at the polling stage, right? So it's the whole thing. And if you don't think that Hillary Clinton has that much control over the Democratic Party, I guarantee you that she does have that much control. Okay, Hillary Clinton has enough control over the Democratic Party that she could commission a poll to have the results that she wants. Fake the whole thing, pay for it and get it into the papers. And everybody at every stage of it would know that it's bullshit, but it would happen anyways because that's the nature of a corrupt political establishment, right? And I can also tell you that the guy that she's running against doesn't have those kind of connections and doesn't have the ability to stop it, right? The only weapon that he has is to overwhelm her with sheer force. It came down again. Now it's at 57.9. It was at close to 70 when they started. Okay, so you can see a trend that's happening here. Can he overwhelm her? If he overwhelms her in Ohio, as I've said, that is evidence that the number of people that he's getting out is enough not just to win a rigged primary through brute force, but to win a rigged primary that was especially extra rigged. Okay, this is not just a case where they knew that they had to rig it. This is a case where they knew that they had to rig it extra strong because they knew that it was going to be high turnout, which means that the turnout has exceeded the expected turnout that they needed to rig. Okay, that would be indicative of a really powerful groundswell, and it would really necessitate the Clinton really take a good look at herself in the mirror and ask if it's time to go home. They called Ohio too early. I mentioned this in Massachusetts. It looks like she stuffed ballots in Boston, and he almost overwhelmed it. I mentioned it in Michigan. It looks like she stuffed ballots in Detroit, and he did overwhelm it. That's where she could stuff ballots. And the urban-rural split is backwards. I mean, did we enter the twilight zone? Then there's something funny going on. So she looks at the expert analysis for today, and they say that she could lose Ohio. So she stuffs Ohio extra good just to make sure you couldn't possibly overwhelm her. So she starts off with a huge lead, 70% initial results, right? Then they call it within a few minutes. Of course, it's just all according to plan. Now, I didn't think Ohio was the state she had to worry about. I thought it was Illinois. And there's a lot of Illinois that hasn't come in yet. But whether I was right or wrong, something is curious. He is consistently gaining in Ohio. She's fallen steadily from 70% to 57%. And this movement is continuing. So wait for it. Can he overwhelm it after all? The extra good ballot stuffing. Can he still get over it? See, this is very consistent. It's the big city. I mean, how do you figure that she gets 75% of the voters in a city where, 40% of the, workers are making minimum wage? Unless, like, they're not voting or, it's not something that really makes any sense. And you can come up with all kinds of different explanations, but like the reality is that whatever explanation you come up with, you have to acknowledge it as irrational. That said, what did I figure Clinton would get? Well, I had her paid around 60. I said it's a win if he keeps her under 60. I'm not going to flip out about that. It's about right. He does seem to have beat the odds in North Carolina though. And that's a positive. Again, we're still seeing the numbers tighten up in Ohio. He does need to open up a bigger lead in Missouri, and he's got to. I really would have expected him to win by a large margin in Illinois. It seems as though the Chicago ballots got counted early. Yeah, see, and that's where you would expect her to do the best. Then again, it's also where you would expect a lot of the votes in the state would be, right? Yeah, you're looking at, in total, there's about 1.2 million votes counted so far, and a little under 1 million are in Chicago, right? So, like, you're looking at like 90% of the votes so far in Chicago. There's which is most of the precincts, right? So in the end, it's going to be like 60% of the votes are in Chicago, and if she wins by, well, I mean, look, it's 53 there, 52 there, right? So I mean, the end result of Illinois is not known yet. Again, though, you would expect her to rig the ballots in Chicago. She looks like she's going to win by 75, 80,000 votes there. So it's again, can he overwhelm it? This is the pattern that's erupting. The difference between Michigan and Illinois is that they counted Detroit last in Michigan. So he was ahead the whole night, and they counted Chicago first in Illinois. So it's going to be that he's going to have to catch up. A lot of these precincts aren't reporting at all, and they're the ones that are going to help Bernie out more than anything else. So in the end, if 60% of the precincts are in Chicago, and oh wait. I see. Okay, so that's another big precinct there, and it looks like it's right in Chicago too. Okay, so again, we're dealing with lots of. It's the same basic pattern, right? And it's the same basic pattern that doesn't make sense. It's not just that it's the same basic pattern; it's that it's the same nonsensical basic pattern across. A couple of new counties came in. And actually, they both closed quick. Even with that said, the numbers actually went down. So for Clinton. So hey, it's moving in the right direction, but it's moving very slowly. And what is this in Ohio? 56.3. It's come down a lot. So, is the primary fair? How's the cognitive dissonance doing? Well, the night started off pretty poorly with these huge head starts. Initial state, or whatever it is that it said. I guess that these are absentee ballots or early voting or whatever, and we can see that those votes were disproportionately in favor of Clinton, and that these leads came down dramatically over the night. It's all very easy to explain and everything, older voters and whatnot, but we have to keep coming back to this thought experiment. If she was going to rig it, how would she do it? And that's exactly how she would do it. Now, it is what it is, right? If you want to play the game, you have to play by the rules. It's a little irony, but it's life. He knew what he was getting into. Michigan proved that it is possible to overrun the ballot box stuffing and win with brute force of high turnout, but it's hard to maintain, and she can, of course, adjust by stuffing more ballots. Florida was a little wider than the late polls suggested, albeit not a lot. So, we can gloss ahead of that, right? She supposedly got 75% of the vote in Miami-Dade. Again, there's that pattern, right? It's a 90,000 vote win. But what's the difference? It's a delegate, okay? Like, Chicago might seem more important. She probably won by stuffing boxes in Chicago with black people's names. See how this works? It's the Democrats, folks. What did you expect? But it works out to a few delegates at the end of it. Not a big difference. Okay, the question here was whether it was rigged, and again, I think they tried to, but they're only stuffing it enough to try and get across a media message. Okay, she wins. That's the idea. It's not that they're trying to, stack the whole thing. It's just they want to make sure that she gets the check mark, she gets the win. Veni vidi vici. And that is the right mindset with this woman, right? So she got enough ballots in Illinois and Missouri to swing the check mark, and it seems like she may be overcompensated in Ohio, leaving a slightly unbelievable result. Okay, but the cheating is not really altering the race, so we're not yet. The antidote is higher turnout. You gotta wonder maybe if that's why Bernie keeps pushing this, right? You can only stuff so many ballot boxes, and you can overpower any and every attempt to cheat with brute force if you can get enough people out. So do I think it's rigged? Yeah, sort of. But I don't think there's any use in complaining about it. It's a better idea to run the lines instead.